but it's been pretty strained lately, and I think it'll fix itself, but things that certainly don't help.
Yeah.
So
All
that's
right.
COD drama.
Well, yeah. Well, let's wrap things up. Any last thoughts before we move on?
Now let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. All right. LMQ. All right, another big one, big
This
segment
one
here.
is nuts. This is
Yeah,
so
this is
crazy.
just crazy. And for those of you that don't know anything about this, this is a League of Legends segment here, and LMQ is the top NA team right now, currently in the standings, and lots of stuff been going on with just a dispute over the ownership of the team at this point between two really, just two big companies or two companies, and lots of drama happening behind it. Lots of people, telling one story and another story coming from the other. The two companies that we're talking about are TC and A&K, and these, they're both kind of basically saying that they should, they're owners of the team, right? And pulling Riot into this whole thing too. So Riot's had to make some statements recently, but lots of, again, lots of drama happening here, and hasn't been resolved quite yet. And I think it's still in the process of being resolved. Just probably with, just legal, just their lawyers involved here. But wanted to get, I guess, your opinions, each of your opinions on this drama and what you guys think. Like, who actually should own, who does own LMQ, and like who's actually in the wrong here. So, Richard, get your thoughts first.
I mean, the thing is, Chris, like to even this story could take up an entire show in
Oh,
its own right.
totally. I mean, it's
It's
crazy.
one of the esports stories of the year. It's absolutely huge. So let's start where I want to start, which is I worked on this story for 2 days. I was gathering facts and reaching out to sources, reaching out to Sharon and various other people to try and get to the bottom of it all. And what had happened was On Gamers had already got this story,
Yeah,
and
Travis.
yeah, and I want to give absolute credit here. Like I've said, me and Travis, we've had our differences in the past. The rumor, the word on the streets was On Gamers were going to quash this story on the grounds that it was only going to harm the players. There was a real potential that the organization could be disqualified, and the word was that On Gamers weren't going to publish. So I got a little bit complacent. I thought I had extra time, which I didn't. And Travis pulled an all-nighter to sift through all the shit, get it all down, and then published anyway, despite some reservations from other people on the On Gamers team. So I'd like to officially welcome Travis to the Journalists Club. You did it, son. Seriously, that
Well,
that isn't even a joke. Well done, honestly. Fucking credit to him. And it shows that he's got more strings to his bow than just the interviews that he does. So good on him. Now, to move on to the crux of the matter, this fucking story it underlines the complexities that Riot have had to deal with, persistently throughout this creation of a global league, and that is that they cannot be some omnipresent being. They can't necessarily see what's going on in the Korean teams. We've had match fixing allegations, all sorts of things like that. Now we've got this sort of Chinese corruption, and I think that again is indicative of how Riot have grown way too big too soon. And they're realistic. They talk about competitive integrity a lot, and these are the kind of things that undermine that speech. So when this happened, this LMQ sort of ownership query came around, it seemed that for me, like, it was just going to be a routine change of organization. They had to change owner because of a dispute, and that was par for the course. But then it became a little bit more sinister, and it was kind of clear that not only was the ownership being argued about, but also there was this sort of potential for joint ownership, that their sister club, Royal Club, had this sort of crossover ownership as well, which of course violates their rules as outlined in LCS Rule 3.1, which states no owner, I'm going to read that here, no owner or affiliate can control more than one professional team. So in the midst of all of that, I mean, that's a big enough deal in its own right. But then you have Sharon come out and say, well, hey, I didn't even know I'd been let go of. I didn't know I'd been fired. I didn't know these changes were happening, which rustled everyone's jimmies, because Sharon had made it her business to be the face of the organization, to be the face of LMQ. She definitely had done a lot of good work for the organization. There's two sort of conflicting versions at the moment, and I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I think she was someone who initially started off as having done a lot of good work for the organization, definitely deserved the praise. She was very unlucky with the whole situation with her husband, kind of disappearing with the money and things like that. Sucks for her. But equally, by the same token, another version gets released a few days later, just when everyone's playing the violin for LMQ Sharon. That came out today.
Yep.
And that was basically saying, well, this woman was actually a little bit of a tyrant and had done lots of terrible things for the organization. That was from Xiang Gu, a.k.a. Alex Gu, who's the player manager from Team LMQ. So this situation just gets murkier and murkier. Riot announced today they're going to be doing a formal investigation into what's going on. Didn't really say a lot in their statement, but ultimately this team has got financial problems. This team has now got a severe legal battle on hand to sort of find out who owns them. If the ownership goes to one person, then that doesn't even necessarily solve the problem, because they are involved in sponsorship of other teams, which creates a conflict of interest. So if they win their legal battle, there's a realistic chance they could get disqualified. So in winning, they would actually be losing. And in the midst of all of this are the players. And for me, the LMQ story is amazing. It, again, is one of those great stories of the year. The players, just the players. Because think about what they did. They came over. We had all of the old pros saying, Chinese players winning the North American League. Thanks Obama. All of that racist bullshit, pseudo-racist bullshit that was going on. These people went through the proper channels. They acquired visas. They learned English. They didn't disrespect anyone in the league. They treated it very, very seriously. They went through Challenger. They slogged the way to get into the LCS. And by all accounts, when I was investigating this story, these are really nice, timid, professional guys who have actually been quite scared while all of this is going on. They've been in some scary situations as part of this potential financial corruption surrounding the organization. And ultimately, whichever way it goes, certainly their campaign at Worlds is going to be under a threat from just the disruption. But there's still a realistic chance they might not even get to go there because they could get disqualified. And what a fucking tragedy. What an awful, awful shame that would be for all of those guys who've really been inspirational in how they've approached, the esports version of the American dream. So all things told, to sum it up in 2 words, fucking mess.
Yes. Definitely a mess. And I mean, there's even talk, in all this, just this whole drama about ownership, there's talk about, one of the companies just trying to position themselves to steal the team, right? In this whole, just the whole process of getting a visa. So that's interesting in its own right. Cody, have you been following this story?
Yeah, I've been following it as well as I could, but it's very complicated. Because
it changes every day.
Yeah, it's a different account every day.
Every time I wake up, someone's like, "Well, that was sort of true, but most of this was a lie." It's just nuts, man. This thing is just so crazy. The concept of ownership in Call of Duty, Jesus Christ, the concept of ownership in League of Legends is just so fucked up and diluted from what it actually means. It's been very difficult for me to keep track of it. I really am sympathetic towards the players, though, because it seems like they are just getting fucked. So for every version of the story that I've heard, the one consistent thing is that the players are just getting fucked and have no idea or control over what's going on.
And ultimately, if there's a decision that comes in to disqualify, nobody loses more than the players. And that's the real crux of the issue here. So, I've been critical of Riot. I don't know if people are aware of that. I've been critical of Riot in the past.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
That's why I'm
Didn't
wearing
know
this
that.
T-shirt today, out of solidarity. It's, you know, the Triforce, because they got tons of problems. So I want to, you know, just fucking show a bit of solidarity, because this is a fucking awful situation.
It is.
I mean, look,
It is.
it was definitely brought to their attention that something was going on. They probably could have dealt with it a lot sooner. They probably could have had a firmer hand, so it didn't get to this stage. Well, what the community are now getting is all these like secondhand accounts from people, and it was all, oh, poor Sharon on, you know, day one.
Yep.
When the story broke, and then it was like, oh, what's going on with Sharon on day 2, and now here we are on day fucking 3, and it's like, fuck Sharon. Some people are saying that, you know. It seems to be this like hugely complex situation that could have all been avoided if Riot had maybe employed a bit of due diligence at the start, but they didn't. So we're here now, and I think what they said in their statement today about wanting to protect the players is actually quite admirable, because in all of this, we've got a group of young guys who have moved countries to pursue their dream job and have the potential to have that snatched away and have to go home and in disgrace almost. And that's not fair, because they brought so much to the North American LCS.
Pretty shitty when the organization itself is screwing this up, when the players are holding their end of the deal. But
this is an ongoing issue you're always going to have when you move into these regions, and this isn't to be fuck. You know, it is. There are serious problems in certain regions when it comes to esports. We know Korea has had a history of match fixing. We know China, the same. We know that there's certainly some financial irregularities in a lot of Chinese esports organizations. These are things that are these are problems that need to be fundamentally addressed. And if you don't come into those regions with a firm hand and say, look, we want to work with you guys, but we're going to have to talk about this stuff, and you know, if you're just desperate to expand without really looking to address those problems, then things like this are going to come back and bite you on the ass. I mean, Riot already found out the hard way with the whole Korean problems they've had, you know, and certainly in StarCraft, many people have learned this lesson, including Steven. You can't fuck with Kesper. You know, Kesper are a law unto themselves and always will be, until someone really takes them to task and makes a strong challenge to stop that sort of dominant hegemony that they have over the Korean esports scene. So I think, I'm a little bit sympathetic towards Riot, but this LMQ situation is a huge mess, and we're nowhere near close to the full truth of it. There's still several key accounts that need to come out. I think ultimately, whatever happens in the ownership dispute and this new business that's been set up for them, this Lulu or however you pronounce it. It looks everything like a Luyu Esports LLC, a California limited liability company. It looks bullshit. It looks like one of these shell companies that is set up. How
was this not figured out beforehand? That's my thing.
Yeah,
man. Like,
exactly.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So, oh God, don't say this. Say it. Don't say it. Say it. Don't say it. Okay. I think this is one of those things. If this situation doesn't go public, I don't know if anyone cares. I don't know if Riot cares. I don't know if anyone cares. Like, if this situation doesn't come out and we're just happy to have a shell company that maybe there's a conflict of interest going on, because there's so many conflict of interests already going on in League of Legends, and we know there are.
Yeah.
Yes.
We know there are, and we maybe I need to spell it out. Maybe I don't. I won't spell it out today. I'm not going to spell it out. But you people out there know what the conflict of interests are. You know which teams have the relationships or have had the relationships. I wrote about Nip and Lemon Dogs, so I can definitely talk about that. And one of the things that came out when I was writing about the Nip and Lemon Dogs thing that didn't really make it into the final account because I couldn't really substantiate it. It was very secondhand information. Was Riot had known throughout that the two organizations had a relationship, that they knew throughout, and were actually the player liaison was talking directly to NIP staff members to ask about Lemon Dog concerns. So Riot must have known that they had this strange relationship, and I don't believe Riot don't know, but I think when it becomes a public concern, I think obviously we need to go down the road of what's proper. What do our rules state? What do we need to tell the fans? Like, how do we make it look like this isn't just another esports circle jerk with all the complexities and conflicts of interests and cross relationships that everything in esports has? Riot have tried to hold themselves up to a much higher standard, but we haven't addressed fundamental issues. And I think Cody's absolutely right. When you look at this Luyu Esports LLC thing, this the way it's been set up, and indeed the fact that we had people who had ownership of LMQ before that who had ties to other organizations and publicly admitted they had ties to other organizations and said as far as they were concerned, because they weren't owners, it didn't constitute a conflict of interest.
Workaround.
Why at that point? Why at that point? Yeah, exactly. Why at that point Riot don't say, well, actually, yeah, it is a fucking problem, and it's definitely more of a problem now that you've spoke about it in an interview and said it isn't a problem. Firm hand is required for things like this, because otherwise people are going to lose faith in your product. So Cody's absolutely right. I don't know why this wasn't sort of picked up earlier and wasn't dealt with sooner.
Well, is it even
before we continue?
Can you
though,
even
I would
pull
like
that
to.
Off now? I mean,
I'd like to jump in before we continue.
Yeah, go for it.
With a low price of $29.99.
Oh boy.
Over the course of 3 months, me and some of my former colleagues can teach you how to have 2 LCS teams, and that's a steal.
Well, I mean, is it possible to do? No. Is it possible to do now? I thought they changed the rules. That's not possible to do it with maybe some of those things that you're talking about.
No, dude, it's there in black and white. No owner or affiliate of owner may own or control more than one professional team.
No, but I heard there was some kind of sponsor. I mean, I think the sponsor, the whole sponsored thing, it has always been the workaround this rule. But I thought they added something that actually makes that harder or impossible now. Is that not correct? They just can't apply it to, they can't really apply it to.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think the rules have changed this season.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not right then. So the rules.
Again, I could be wrong. I'll await a Riot response. They like to respond when people criticize them if it's softball criticism. So we'll wait and see. But it says in black and white. Let's say it goes on to say, if an owner or affiliate of owner is found to have any, I mean, this is the key word, any financial interest or benefit or any level of influence in another team, she will be required to immediately divest said interest in one of the 2 teams and may be subject to punishment by the LCS. Now, reality time. There are many people who have financial interests or benefits or any level of influence in multiple organizations within the LCS. Fact. Absolute fact. And I'm tired of hearing the arguments about because we've got this delineation on paper. We say, sorry, this demarcation on paper. We say that we're separate, and therefore we are separate. The idea, for example, that Alex Garfield, who was interviewed at the International, as being the guy who owned 2 teams at the International, right, and was open about it and talked about it expressly in the interview. Yet when it comes to Evil Geniuses and the Alliance as LCS teams, nah, I don't. I just let them do their own thing over there. I mean, the idea that anyone as successful as Alex would ever do that, but we turn that blind eye. We say, okay, it ticks the boxes on paper, so we allow it to happen. And there's other organizations. There's organizations in North America. There's other organizations in Europe that have relationships. And I say Lemon Dogs and Nip were the famous ones. They're irrelevant, really, because at the moment neither of them are in LCS, and some of their players are banned now. So it has been going on, and I think what Riot have sort of focused on is we need certain brands to be affiliated with League of Legends. Like EG are always going to get a free pass. They're almost too big for the league. That's changing. But I mean, I think, for example, no one looks too hard at the relationship between TSM and Cloud9 because there's a 100K viewer spike on Twitch when TSM play a game. And indeed, the highest viewer numbers of the season have come when TSM play CLG. So can Riot realistically afford to start imposing the rules that they claim to want to uphold? I'm not too sure they can. And I think that this LMQ situation is indicative of how messy it can actually get when Riot try and trust the organizations to handle their business in a way that's going to make use of the loopholes that they allow them to make use of. I mean, we're not even necessarily at this juncture. We're talking about a conflict of ownership, and you know that we're
yeah,
not
it's
even
not even
really
to the
looking...
point where we're talking about that part of it. So there,
But
you're right. It's two layers.
They did have
yeah.
a relationship. Yeah, we did have a relation. They did have a relationship with Royal Club, and they admitted that they didn't in public anymore, implying that they did at one point. So this is what I'm saying. We need to be absolutely clear. And Korea has a number of sister clubs, you know, teams that have sister teams. It's a real mess. You're either serious about the 3.1 rule or you're not. And this is what I mean. It's that problem of inconsistency again, creating issues. I don't think Riot could have foresaw how bad the LMQ situation was going to get, but certainly there are plenty of issues closer to home that sort of need to be talked about as well.
When I was working at On Gamers, right, like especially with this, I guess with the spring split is what you guys call it. It became very apparent that there were going to be like conflicting. There were going to be organizations that had vested interests in a couple of teams, right? Which the rule should fucking negate. That's the entire point of the rule. And we really wanted to dive in headfirst into this, right? Because like you know, it might make a difference, or maybe it'd be interesting. And we worked on it, and we worked on it, and we worked on it, and we eventually came to the conclusion that it wasn't worth our time because it doesn't change anything. And I think it might change in the future, but I think you're absolutely right. There are a couple of brands strong enough in the esports industry that the rules just don't apply to, and that's that's not even a League of Legends thing. That's just an esports in general thing, right? For Evil Geniuses, I'd turn the cheek quite a bit, right? Maybe for the LMQ drama has become such a big deal that maybe I don't. But there's a lot of situations in esports where the rules just tend to not apply, and I can't imagine any of you guys chiming in and saying like, well, I think that's not right, because it's been like that for every esports ever. And I think the big issue with Riot right now is they're the biggest persistent league in the entire world, and a lot of people are paying attention to that right now. So there are going to be questions that just need to be answered here pretty soon, right? And that's tough. Because at the, in January when the rules came out and there are, companies that have 2 LCS teams on 2 continents, it's a Reddit thread for a day and then you forget about it. But I think sooner or later these things are just going to have to come up and they're going to need to be addressed. And I think that's coming faster than Riot maybe would have been.
You wouldn't see it in any of the sport. Like, right, sponsors obviously can sponsor multiple teams. That's not an issue. You can even have official league sponsors, which by proxy sponsor every team in that league. That's fine. You can have official apparel, fucking sponsors, not a problem. But you couldn't have one management team, one financial owner own multiple teams in a league. You couldn't do it in any other sport. And there are certainly, whatever we put down on paper, there are certainly conflicting interests in LCS. Now, I'm not even saying, I don't think in Europe or NA, I don't think we've ever seen a rigged game. Ever. Right? So I'm not saying that. But I'm saying on a long enough time scale, we are inviting these kind of accusations by not dealing with these issues. So while it's not necessarily linked directly to the LMQ drama, I think Riot need to really get a hold of their fucking shit. Bringing it back to LMQ, just before we move on to the next topic, I think Riot are in a terrible position. I don't envy them at all. If it turns out to go the way that my research and certainly what's been put out there into the public domain suggests, there has been this conflict of interest all along. I think the only way to preserve the integrity of the league is actually to take the appropriate action, which is to potentially disqualify them. Right?
That
so,
would suck.
And I don't want that to happen to the players.
Yeah, that would suck.
At all. Like, I want to really stress that. That would suck for the players in ways that I can't even begin to imagine. But where are we going to draw the line? Like, if it turns out that has been the case the entire time, what about the other teams in the league that have held themselves, well, not all of them, obviously, but that have held themselves up to the standard that Riot have imposed. Is it fair that a team, gets to go to Worlds in their place, maybe? And it isn't. So there are no easy answers here, and Riot are going to be damned if they do and damned if they don't. For me, I like the idea of competitive integrity. I think when you say it and you mean it, that's what gives any esport legitimacy. That's what we need to be really strict about, because there's been so many letdowns in the past, and this looks bad so far. Maybe they can spin it one way, or maybe more facts will come to light in the next couple of days, and maybe LMQ can slip the noose. But I would, right now, if I was making the decision based on what I've seen when I was researching the story, I think LMQ have, unfortunately, the players haven't known a thing about it, but unfortunately the organization has been guilty of breaking an absolute key rule to the league, and Riot need to act accordingly.
Actually, Steven, I don't know if you've been following this or not, but have you got any opinions on it?
Nope. Sucks that they've got a shell company owning two teams. It's pretty bullshit. Lots of double standards. Lots of people benefiting from it, though. So pretty gay. I think Richard pretty much summarized it.
Yeah.
I agree with Richard too. They're losing market share, like when it comes to like their stream numbers. So I feel like they need to stand for something. Like they just can't be the Riot juggernaut anymore. They need to like really start sinking their teeth into some of these issues that like previously. I feel like a year ago, like an issue like this, you just deflect because like you have more fucking people watching your show than you could ever hope for, and it doesn't matter just because the show will go on. And I feel like now you really just gotta own up. You gotta mean something with these rules.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Cody. Like, throughout, there's one thing Riot do that no other esports company does, and that is they crusade. They absolutely fucking love a good crusade, whether it's about the tribunal, whether it's about, visas. Hey, everyone, look at us. They love it. They love to make that moral grandstanding. Well, okay, now is a chance here to do it for something that actually does matter if you want to be a serious esports league. Like when I was part of CGS back in 2007, we knew some stuff wasn't legit. It all came tumbling out in the wash in 2009, 2010 anyway. The drafts weren't necessarily honest. Certain players got picked for certain teams. People who won the Combine or performed better than others at the Combine didn't get picked up because their story wasn't as good, and they wanted to market the league. And that all came out. And that's the kind of thing that you want to avoid. If you want to be a serious sports league, not even an esports league, a serious sports league, let's get rid of corruption, or even the opportunity to accuse and point and say there is corruption. Riot have an opportunity here to actually do what they do better than anybody else, and that is crusade and take the moral high ground. If they're not interested in doing it for something as important as this, then everything else that they're doing it for is bullshit.
All right. Well,
let's do a break, because there was some news that broke that is actually going to be like a conversation just as long.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think it's worthy because I've been fucked by this before, so I actually have a really strong opinion.
So I mean, what we're talking about, there was this like late breaking news. Is that what you're talking about? Just the late breaking news? The CLG.
Stuff,
yeah, basically CLG's going to be doing a boot camp over in Korea with Monte Cristo, and there's definitely some some aftermath that's going to result in a lot of things.
They're skipping a week of LCS because they have their shit on lock, which will affect every other team in the league.
Well, they're not skipping; they're subbing with a bunch, whole team. Yeah,
that's a joke too.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back. We'll talk about that, and then we'll take your questions. Go ahead and post them, guys, again in the Reddit thread in r/StarCraft, and we'll get to them. We'll be right back.